stop this fire. I was born to be making history. Something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire.
Hello, guys. This is the Ember podcast. I am D Phantom TV, and with me is my co-host Sinbad. Today, we're going to be taking a change of pace from the last episode and be focusing on the wins Intrepid has had as a company.
What's
How's it
up,
going,
guys?
Sinbad?
That's going pretty well, man. I'm glad to have a co-host here with me finally, and I'm glad that it's you in this case. So I think we're gonna rock today's episode. And for anyone that's listening here in the stream, welcome, of course. There's been quite a lot we're gonna be talking about right now, which is actually some things that I think people have kind of forgotten about what Intrepid's accomplished and what they've done so far. And they've kind of been mired down, so we wanted to bring them up and kind of lift them up for once on this show, especially after last episode where we
Yeah.
really kind of hit on them pretty hard. So Danny, if you want to lead us into our first topic.
So our first topic is like the foundations that were built. 1 year prior to the Kickstarter, the game was developed to showcase their ideas and ambitions. Like, me personally, I don't have much to say about prior to Kickstarter or even during the Kickstarter. I wasn't a part of the Kickstarter, but Steven and his company, Intrepid Studios, they've hit a lot of milestones and hit a lot of marks that a lot of people kind of forget about, after the recent developments over, the BR and all the delays and all this controversy. We really have lost focus of what this game is about and the milestones that Intrepid has hit.
Yeah. And so for someone that saw some of the early development, saw the development right before the Kickstarter was fully announced and actually launched, I can tell you just from what we saw back then, we saw basically a lot of like really early footage of like a mage, and it kind of going through like a cave or jumping across and having like a bubble that it could float on, right? We saw a lot of footage around like a city and about how the node system was going to work, nodes 1 and nodes 2, and unfortunately nodes 3 never came. But we did get to see, a lot of the early stuff that they had worked on, like character models, the basis of their ideas being that this would be a world that's player created and player run, right? Being a world that would evolve and develop over time, one that would bring you into it and, essentially, absorb you into it, which would basically be like, you putting as much time, as much effort into it as you want to in order to be successful. This game, the thing that captured me about it, was what they showed before the Kickstarter, kind of making MMOs great again by, bringing back to its roots what really made an MMO, which was building a focus on player communities and working together. For me, that has been lost in a lot of different MMOs, including ones that were once really good, like WoW, for example. World of Warcraft was for a very long time a very good game, but over time it became so easy to do things by yourself that you just lost track of other players. You just didn't really need to participate as much. You could just hit the dungeon finder, for example, and join in on a dungeon and never have to actually talk to anyone.
I think that's a big thing with Ashes is like it's very community driven. Steven even he's taking a very transparent look on his in the back stages where his development team is going. He's made it very transparent and the development process of that. And I think a big reason why they had such a amazing Kickstarter was that it really did bring life back into MMOs. The tagline "Make MMOs Great Again" wasn't just a tagline. There was meaning behind that, and I think like I said, people have definitely lost sight of that.
Yeah, it's true. I think it's easier to focus on what's wrong than it is to focus on what's happened. That's really good. People tend to see the worst in things rather than see what they've actually accomplished so far. Like one of the things that they released quite a long time ago was a couple different blogs, and I've been waiting for them to put out more. And I'm hoping that they do once they have a chance to breathe, because honestly, it's not really that important for the development of the game. But these blogs were, basically the City Hall and then the Great Beard Tavern, I think it was, or the Mighty Beard.
Hmm.
And what they kind of focused on was showcasing like what their ideals are for interaction between members in the community, right? Like for instance, the tavern being a central place that you could go to and interact with people to be able to form parties and go out and go do dungeons together. That'd be kind of like your dungeon finder, quote unquote, but you'd actually go sit down physically at a table with someone and say, hey, like, I want to go do this. You want to go do it with me? Which really meant that you actually had to interact with people, which for someone who's a social recluse like myself, that's somewhat terrifying, but also I love that idea because when it comes down to it, that means I actually have to go out and make friends. I get to see these people's faces more and more as I start to, get I guess intertwined in this community. And that intertwined aspect of it, that aspect that invests you into this node that you're building, also helps you want to defend it. It helps you want to basically
Hmm.
protect your home and to guard it more so than if you just helped out with a little XP. Um, and I think that there's a couple things that make this game really special that they really hit on before the Kickstarter actually started, which is why so many people did back the Kickstarter, which is that sense of community, which is the sense of
Hmm.
making things not easy to do, making them meaningful, making them impactful. For example, those are some of their pillars that conflict in the world has to be meaningful, that the anything that you do has to have consequences or has to basically impact your choices in game and actually make it worth your time to do it.
Yeah.
So those aspects I think are really kind of a big win for them because they set their foundation on the correct footing. I think they put their cornerstone of their building's foundation in the right place, and I think that that will help them succeed throughout all the rest of this drama that they've gone through. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that like their foundation that was built, with their different ideas and ambitions, and definitely a lot of that coming from Steven, and his creativeness and what he wants in an MMO, I think really has, that helped build a lot of what Ashes of Creation's community is based off of.
Yes.
And um kind of going back to the Kickstarter, it was the number one MMO funded through Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, even more so than Star Citizen, but obviously Star Citizen has since then raised a lot of money outside of Kickstarter. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's the number one funded MMO of all time, and I think it even had the most backers of any MMO as well. Um, I think they had over almost 20,000 backers total. Some people even purchased those really high tier $10,000 packages,
Jeez.
which to me, like if I had that kind of money to blow, I would totally have done that too. But at the same time, I don't have that kind of money. I put like on my credit card the $425 package, you know. I'm like, okay, I'll pay this off in like 6 months when I have enough money. But
That's crazy. Yeah, that's like $10,000, and they get. I think I browsed across the what is it, the pledge, and the different things that they get is pretty cool.
it is. Well, I mean, for the $10,000 backer, you actually get to create, I believe, a castle in the game as well as
Wow.
a dungeon, if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull that up again. I can actually find out for sure. But it was, basically one of the better packages, because you actually do get to go out and have a tour, a private tour of the facility. You get quite a lot for what you're actually backing there. Obviously, $10,000 for a video game and basically cosmetics. It's not really, if you're looking at it from a real life perspective, it may not actually
Yeah.
be technically worth it. But as a gamer and as someone who loves to back really good games that I can play and enjoy for many years, I think that value invested is more than worth it.
Hmm.
So I know you haven't personally backed from the Kickstarter stage, but you did decide to make this game the one that you wanted to stream and the one that you wanted to invest your time and effort into. Why would you say that you chose this game, Danny?
Oh, that's a big question. For multiple reasons, Ashes of Creation, has a whole bunch of different features that, that still need implementing, but, they've promised us a lot of different features. And a couple of these features that kind of brought, like, really caught my eye was the corruption system. I really like the idea of, like, you know, a risk reward. I like that kind of like high risk, you're gonna get a high reward, and that way you don't get people punishing these noobs that don't know what's going on or too low level to even retaliate. I think it's pretty a good way to balance the game and good way to yeah, I really like that. That and I mean, I think everyone goes to Ashes of Creation for this. I think the biggest reason that people go to Ashes in the first place is the node system. I think the node system is very cool.
Hmm.
Me personally, this is my first MMO, so I didn't really think there was anything else out there like that. Like it's a very dynamic, universe where things are ever changing. There's real life, conflict. There's, whole bunch of different aspects that are being played in just one node that is crazy. A lot of cool scenarios that will come from it for sure.
Oh yeah, that's 100% true, man. When it comes down to it, like the reason I personally backed the project was I saw that some of the developers were from Star Wars Galaxies, which that piqued my interest right there. That wasn't the main reason, of course, but
Yeah.
that piqued my interest because I loved Star Wars Galaxies. It was one of the best MMOs, in my opinion, that had ever been made up until they tried to copy what World of Warcraft did, and then they basically went downhill from there. But the original design of that game had player housing, it had open world combat, it had guild versus guild and open world combat as well.
Hmm.
It had a lot of aspects of the economy that simply just weren't reproduced until more recently in MMOs again. Like the ability to craft resources out of different quality materials that you could then go out and survey the world for, set up mines to serve, basically create those or to get those materials, and then you could go back and with like your materials, you could create like personalized weapons or personalized gear that was varying in rarity based on the quality of the materials you got. Like for many years, there wasn't really other MMOs that did that. So it's really ahead of
Hmm.
its time for quite a long time there. The other part of it as well, of course, was when they were talking about Ashes of Creation, when Steven was talking about it, you could really see the passion that he had for it, right?
Oh yeah.
Basically, that this is the game that he wants to create, not because he's wanting some money, like that's, I don't think why he did it. He put
Mm-mm.
36 million on the line of his own money into the game. That's pretty much his net worth from
That's a
what I
good chunk of
saw.
change for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he put in pretty much his whole life into his whole life savings into basically creating this company, creating this game from scratch. With I think the first couple of people that joined him were like Pete Pilone, Keith Kovacs, Jeffrey Bard. They kind of helped create this company out of like literally nothing, taking huge risks. Worked a year prior to actually showcasing their stuff at the Kickstarter phase. They literally worked a year with no promise of return. They went to the Kickstarter, said, "Hey, look, this isn't to fund the game. This is for like the cherry on top because we want to bring you something that is going to be truly amazing. We don't want you to pay for us to make the game. We want you
Yeah.
to basically help us support it so we can make it even that much better." And I think that way that they phrased it, the way that they said that, hey, we're not really asking you for money to just put into this crazy idea. We're asking you to help us level it up that much better, make it that much better for us. So that way you can enjoy it even more. I think that's what got me kind of convinced that they weren't just out for my money. They weren't just out trying to money grab or, steal, right? And that made me a lot more comfortable to actually personally back it. Up until then, I had never actually backed anything on Kickstarter. I've always looked at stuff and said, hey, it's pretty neat, but I'm gonna wait and see. Um, and I had backed other MMOs before, but most of those had failed at certain points, so I was pretty burnt. I wasn't gonna back this up
Yeah.
because why would I? But their passion, their drive to succeed, the fact that they were making a game that they themselves wanted to play, and the fact that the game was already pretty much well funded, I think that's why, they convinced me and many others, to basically back it. Obviously, people can share in the comments in the Twitch stream here if they want why they personally backed, but yeah, that's why I personally backed it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people backed the project just because of the sheer, um team behind it. You got Steven and you got like, these core you got their core development team, their core um and they're all, all veterans, and everyone could see how fast they were developing and how passionate they were breaking barriers, and these and how ambitious they were. Um
Hmm.
and a lot of people pretty much invested in Steven and his team to give us a good MMO. Because at that point, there really wasn't too much to base our decision on, besides the fact that these guys are willing to be, putting in the hours, and we've seen that now. They've put so many hours of long, late night hours,
Hmm.
blood, sweat, and tears into developing this game for us,
Oh yeah.
and I think that's something that is definitely missed a lot.
Yep, that's true. I mean, so here's a question though for you, because they have had some setbacks, recently,
Yeah.
especially with the communication in the game and so on. Why would you say that you've kind of continued to back them despite those setbacks?
Oh, I mean, everyone's heard, why produce or why make a BR, when people kickstarted an MMO, and there's a whole bunch of the delays. There's a whole bunch of controversy of, you know, how much time are they putting towards the MMO now that this BR and all these other side projects are maybe taking their time. Ultimately, like you know, no matter how much development they've done, or lack of development, you can always go back to the team and Steven. I think anyone who's currently still in the project, or currently still watching, or anything, everyone's kind of putting their faith into Steven and Intrepid. And I think that's what any kind of Kickstarter MMO, you kind of there isn't that much to really base your decision on, besides,
Hmm.
your gut feeling, and in this case, I think a big part of just anyone who's still kind of looking at the light at the end of the tunnel is Intrepid. Just
Hmm.
that one word, Intrepid.
And it's a good point. At the end of the day, we've put our faith into them, right? And I'm gonna see it through. Personally, I'm gonna see it through. If they come out with a game that's half of what they promised, honestly, I'll still play it. And I'll still do my best to help keep them developing it,
Hmm. Yep.
Because I don't personally, I know there's a big stigma about them delaying the game, but I don't personally mind that. I feel like if they need to take the extra time, to make it good, to make it what it should be, I think they should take that time. And at the end of the day, I'm still going to be here a year from now, 2 years from now, waiting on it.
Yep. Yep.
I've already backed since March of 2017. Like that's when I first got in. The Kickstarter was like I think 2 months after that. Yeah, that's I've been waiting. Now about 2 years, right? Um, yeah, it's almost about 2 years. It's got a couple months and it'll be
Yeah.
2 years. Um, but I'm not going to stop. When it comes down to it, I believe in what these guys are doing, and that's why I'm going to
Yeah.
continue to back
There's
it.
always setbacks.
Hmm. And plus, I'm a cosmetic whore, so I will keep buying cosmetics. Steven, please stop. You're hurting me. Um, but no, it's true though. Like I'll buy cosmetics not just because I like to have everything. I'm a collector, but mostly because I want to make sure that they can continue to pay their salaries and they can
Hmm.
continue to develop. Because there is a lot of costs, a lot of unexpected costs when it comes to developing MMOs. And even though they may have had the original budget paid for with that 36 million, they always need more, right? That's
Hmm.
something that's true with development in general, but especially MMO development. So I'm gonna continue to do my best to support them. And although my wife may someday divorce me for it, I will be married to Ashes of Creation, and so I'm gonna be playing that for the long term. Um, yeah.
Good goals.
Oh yeah, right. All right. So I think that kind of leads us into our next topic, which is, them actually making progress on the game, right?
Mhm.
Which we actually first really got to see a showcase of at PAX West. Now, PAX West was actually paid for me to go to by my guild. I actually went there personally, recorded footage. You can actually find some of my footage on Death Proxy's channel, on the Dungeon Crawler Network as well, with the Jealouses channel, um, and on my personal YouTube channel as well. I have it up there. But we actually got to record and film footage of the game in what that kind of like almost like trailer, kind of like demo version of it was.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not sure, Danny. I know you come from a like a first-person shooter slash
Mhm.
MOBA type gameplay. But if you've ever played an MMO with like tab target, that's basically what it was. Where you can hit tab, it will target and cycle to different players or different enemies, and then you can
Okay.
automatically hit them with your skills. So kind of the exact opposite of what their current system is, right?
Yeah.
Um, Things were really clunky, things were really slow. It
Mhm.
basically looked like a slightly older version of World of Warcraft, in terms of that animation style, that combat style.
Mhm.
But they actually had at that same event a small little dungeon run you could go through, where you get to kill the lava boss. I forget what it's called right now. I think it's like something, I don't remember it, but it's not important. But you basically got to go through a whole, uh, whole like little dungeon crawl basically, and at the
Okay.
end of it you got to beat a boss. But in order to get there, you actually had to use each person's skill sets in the party. So like for instance, the ranger had a skill set that would let you follow footprints on the ground, so you could see where like this hidden wall was that was unveiled by the, I think it was like the cleric or the mage, who
That's
could use a
cool.
skill set and unveil this wall that would let you walk through it then. There was jumping puzzles where you had to like jump from panel to panel to make it across. And if you fell, you would end up in like a river of acid and you would immediately die. Which I remember them showing at the showcase for that I think Jeffrey Bard or Steven, one of them basically fell in and ended up perishing.
Oh no.
But it was because the other one trolled the other person, so it was pretty funny. Um, and then at the end, they also showed that they had actual MMO mechanics. So they showed that they had a cleric for healing. They showed they had a tank or for taking the DPS of the monster. They showed that they had ranger with its abilities. And so they had actually quite a lot into that style of gameplay. They had 4 different builds. Um, and so from the time of the Kickstarter to that time was about 3 months. So within about 90 days, they essentially built and developed like a whole demo showcasing what their progress is. And so for them, that was a major win. That's something that's not easy to do. They literally worked, I think, like 18-hour days to make that happen.
Jeez.
And I think a lot of people forget about that they did that in that short of a time frame. And yeah, nowadays what we see is taking longer and longer, but that's because they keep building upon the progress that they've made already. And I think people need to remember that. Um, yeah, what are your opinions on the progress from some of like those old tab target video games to what they kind of showcase at PAX West to now?
So yeah, I've seen the early footage. I've seen the first like showcase at PAX West, and it going from that to the demo of the Kickstarter is a big feat. Like you said it's yourself, they were working like 18-hour days. That's insane. They're willing to put that much effort and that much time into something they're truly passionate about. I mean, there's always going to be setbacks in a game. In development, quote unquote, development is fluid and it's there for a reason, right? Because there will always be setbacks. And then there will always be, there's been a couple good, what would you call that?
I guess
being
like
ahead of schedule. They've been ahead of schedule a couple of times too.
right.
So it's not always delays. It's not always negative. Of course, it felt like there might have been a couple poor decisions or some bad decision making on migrating the website and releasing the open beta at the same time. There could have been a couple things that could have been done differently, but ultimately it's just a minor setback in the grand scheme of things. We gotta
Yeah.
I think that's what some people kind of forget is like when we're in the heat of the moment, we're like, well, we didn't get Castle Sieges, we have to wait another few weeks, woe is me. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, just take it back. They're trying their hardest. They've given us, look what they've given us so far, right? And I think we gotta, kind of remember that for a second.
That's true, man. That's
They're
true.
humans. They make errors. Okay.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, right? Steven, he's a businessman when it comes down to it. He's also a very much a gamer.
Hmm.
But this is his first time trying to make this kind of game. And so
Yeah.
yeah, there's going to be a couple mistakes here and there. That's fine. It's a learning process for him just as much as it is, for them as a company, right? And so
Hmm.
they will succeed. I think that that's important to remember. It's just going to take a little while for them to do it. And I think as long as we're patient, like for instance, I believe Alpha 1, the actual Alpha 1 is coming out probably around June or,
Hmm.
at the latest July. By that time, we're going to get to see a lot of progress that we haven't
Oh
seen
yeah.
before.
Oh yeah.
Progress I'm pretty confident that they're working on with the rest of their, I think, 200-person team at this point, and progress that the apocalypse is going to be benefiting as far as stability goes for them. So actually, that does lead us into the next part here, which is Alpha Zero. That was before Alpha 1 or before Alpha 1 Phase 1, which is now the apocalypse.
Yeah. A
Um,
little confusing, but I think
a little
everyone's
bit,
got it.
a little bit. So in terms of timeline here, Alpha Zero happened first, right? They tested that for
Yeah.
several months. In Alpha Zero, the initial start of it was awful. Not gonna lie, it was pretty bad. The main reason, of course, is because you're first getting in, you're first trying to even just log in, and we literally had what we called a windmill boss. Or
Mm.
basically you couldn't get past this loading page with a windmill on it. So that's a little joke. They basically made the windmill a actual boss where you actually got to see like fire and stuff coming out of it as it's animated and like
That's
people dead in
great.
front of it. It was pretty funny. Which, by the way, Steven personally lifted the NDA for talking about Alpha Zero, so I'm not going to get in trouble for disclosing these things.
Nice. Nice.
Um, but as far as that first like week, basically, that first week I was getting maybe 10 frames a second. There was
Jeez.
major issues where there was like a memory leaks in the server, where the server would go down. There was lots and lots of different stability issues at the beginning. But over like a 3-week time frame, they improved that to a point where I was starting to get 60 frames a second on average consistently. I was starting to see that I could log in the game without having to hit that boss and then restart everything, re-download everything. Um,
Jeez.
they really improved very quickly, and I think that people need to realize that they are working to make sure that their backend system for when the actual game launches is perfect. Because as long as that's perfect, all the cosmetic stuff that they put on later that can be worked on and tweaked, but that backend system has to be right, and I think that's what
Yeah.
they're doing.
And I think that was a big part of the APOC
Hmm.
release, initially with the BR APOC coming out, not even the open beta, but before, when it was still NDA, um, there was a lot of, server issues, lots of crashing, lots of this, lots of that. And I think personally, everyone was fine with it. Everyone
Hmm.
was like, okay, well, this is fine as long as it doesn't persist into the launch. And I think their backend systems have definitely improved since then.
Yeah.
We've seen it through. I mean, that with the delays, whatever. Once we got into the actual game, there wasn't any crashing. Servers were able to withstand a decent amount of people. We had 80
Hmm.
player lobbies. I think I even had like a 90 player lobby at once, and it was able to withstand that. And definitely the BR was just way smoother than in the
Oh yeah,
past.
it really is. I mean, that's the thing. Like people get really antsy very quickly about anything that lasts more than a day or two, right? Like, I mean, come on, people. Like, programming doesn't work like that. You have to have many iterations of something to be able to make sure that it's improving. And so that takes time. It really does take time. And that's why we're in a testing phase right now. That's why we're in a basically development phase where we're understanding that it is going to be getting better. It just has to take the time to make sure that happens. Because as they're testing this, they're literally rewriting the code to make sure that the next build is that much more stable. But because obviously they're rewriting a whole code, one missed colon or one missed parentheses or whatever, one missed bracket or one I instead of an L, that can cause a lot of issues in other
Yep.
parts of the code, right?
Yep.
So that's the thing. When you're doing this live, you're typing it in, you're basically
Things can
saying,
get crazy real quick.
oh yeah, that's why, we would have a test that one day was perfect, super
Yep.
good, right? And then the next day, what the heck? I can't
Crash
even
instantly.
like,
Things are going
yeah,
crazy.
I
Yeah.
can't get
Just like,
in. I
oh my
can't invite
gosh.
anyone. Only solos is working for some
Ah,
reason. Um, but that's the thing, right? This is like a live development process, one that normally would be handled internally only and would be underneath an
yeah.
NDA,
I think
right?
that's the cool part about it. Is like Intrepid's allowing us to be on the inside, to be able to see this. And a lot of people kind of forget that. It's like, they come into my chat, I'll be sitting there at a loading screen like, oh, it's down, delayed, or Intrepid sucks. They don't know how to freaking develop a game. It's like, this should be, I mean, this normally is tested internally.
Yeah.
We're getting the privilege of
Hmm.
seeing it early, being able to see, seeing the inside of what development is like. And it's cool for me. This is the first time I've been in an alpha testing of any game, or pre-alpha for
Right.
that matter. And I personally love it. I think it's a great opportunity just to see what it's like, how fluid development is.
Hmm. I agree. And so that's actually one thing that I think that they're doing really well right now is actually getting those stability improvements out there pretty
Mhm.
quickly. The fact that they took the battle royale down for a couple weeks so they could work on it more. I think that that's necessary. When you're trying to actually build out, everything that needs to be built out, you need that time frame to be able to actually do that. The fact that they push back, the siege mode, for example, like that, although it sucks to have it pushed back, I think is a better decision than just releasing something out there that's completely broken where you can't even get in to test it.
Yeah, I
Like,
think the decision behind that was definitely warranted, and I
mhm,
think it definitely mattered. Like, maybe he might have jumped the gun on releasing open beta for the BR a little bit too early. Maybe, who knows? I think it was the correct choice to kind of cut it off. He said, we have enough testing. We got all this information from this test. Let us, give us a couple weeks. We're going to give you a better finished product, which we can now
mhm.
confidently call open beta.
Yep.
I think that was a smart move.
It was. Now obviously people aren't super happy with the battle royale, and we know why. Because it is
Yeah.
a battle royale. It's not an MMO. But realistically, I think that they need to look at the real purpose behind it. Which that purpose is to make sure that the MMO functions correctly. Yeah, they could have done, like an arena. They could have done like an arena like they had with PAX West. But to be honest, battle royale is in.
Yeah.
People are playing it. It's what's popular. And then they're looking at those kids and they're like, I want some of that Fortnite money. No. But really, when it comes down to it, it is meant to help the MMO. It's meant to help the development of the background of that. Um, and so I'm not too worried about that in the long run. I think that the fact that they've been able to make it as stable as it is this quickly is actually a pretty big win for them.
Oh yeah. Oh, and I the the back end system can be taken from, you know, it can be implemented. I mean, it is part of like it'll be AOC.
Mhm.
It's so easily implementable that it's just so, I don't know. It's so valuable
Yeah.
because if they were having to work on these back end systems on the actual launch, that would, if these crashes were happening, it would be detrimental to the game.
It would be, yeah. It definitely
Yeah.
would be. Now, one thing that kind of gives me a little bit more confidence when kind of just jumping back to like when PAX West happened, like I got to meet a lot of the development team, right? Like I got to
Mhm.
actually personally meet them. I got to personally talk with them. Like I talked with Jeffrey Bard, with Steven, with Michael Bacon, and I actually got to talk with John Ariano and Keith Kovac as well. They were both at PAX West, like helping out with the front. And, they had
Mhm.
sometimes that was some downtime for them, and so I was like, hey, what can I help with? Or just kind of picking their brain about stuff. And one of the concept artists, which was Jeff Deliere, I got to talk with him specifically about what he thinks of like Intrepid, about what he thinks of Steven and the culture there, and what they were trying to accomplish, right? And I talked
Mhm.
to him for like a half hour about it. But the biggest thing that he always kept coming back to was that he believes in Steven and he believes that what they're going to do is going to work. Steven has the buy-in of pretty much everyone of his staff. There was no hint of animosity because they had to work like in crazy hours.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be committed.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. So the fact that is, that even like one of their concept artists who is probably going crazy with carpal tunnel now just because he's had to like write down so many different concept designs every single month
Mhm.
for these cosmetics. You know, even if he's being overworked, like he didn't want to show it. Like he wanted to show that he was here 100% for Ashes of Creation and for the MMO that we're backing. And for Intrepid because he believes personally in what Steven's trying to accomplish. Um,
Eh, yeah, and
yeah.
that's important, having such a dedicated team that's passionate about what they're making. It makes it so that these ambitions that they have are, they have some security to them because the people behind those ambitions are passionate. They
Mhm.
really want, they're gamers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they know exactly what they want.
Which, talking about people working for Intrepid, Intrepid itself, I think actually is upwards of almost 200 employees now, right? I think that they've moved
With
past 100.
outsourcing, yeah.
Yeah. So the fact is that right now they are one of the largest MMO development companies currently. Like they're one of the biggest ones right now
Wow.
making a current MMO. And so they actually have a very large team working on this, making sure that it's
Oh
going
yeah.
to happen. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, you're taking time away from the MMO to work on the BR." Realistically, how many guys do you think are actually working on the real battle
I
royale?
mean, it doesn't take that many. It's like how many people does it take to screw in a light bulb? Let's
Right.
be honest. The VR.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you throw in some stock. So here's something that most people don't know. A lot of the character models and cosmetics in the battle royale are from Paragon, I believe. Um,
Huh.
yeah, they're stock character models. So that right there doesn't take a lot of time.
No.
Not realistically. I mean, you just literally throw it in and put some textures on
Yeah.
it and you're good. Um, so, I mean, realistically, they don't need a huge team working on the development of the Battle Royale. What they have probably most of their team working on is the MMO at this point because they have 200 people. And then probably a good portion of their engineers working on the back end and then transferring that information from the back end
Hmm.
over to the MMO because it's really is valuable data for them.
Yeah.
Um, but still, I mean, the fact that they have over 100 employees, almost I think 200 now at this point. I mean, that's huge. That's something that as a company I never expected them to accomplish. I thought they're going to be an indie company, but they're turning into a AAA one at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they have people working on it on the project 24/7, pretty much. Like, they got people outsourced in what, France, I think, and
Mhm.
some Asian country. I'd like to say.
Yep.
So they got people all around the clock working on this project, and that many hours makes for fast development.
Mm-hmm. That's true, man. That's definitely true.
Li- like I think with the increase of numbers on their roster and the amount of just man hours that they have, it isn't that unrealistic to expect 2020 before 2020 release.
Hmm.
Um so who knows, time will tell, but it's not that out of reach.
Right. I mean, if they keep up their pace right now that they're doing currently, And then what they do need to do is show us a little bit more than just concept art. I know that's hard to do because really, how are you going to show code, you know?
Yeah.
But I think as they get closer to like Alpha 1, giving us a little bit more sneak peeks into it, you know, outside of the Battle Royale map, you know, because obviously that map is pretty small. It's not what was promised for Alpha 1.
Mhm.
You know, we were expecting 120 square kilometers to land
Mhm.
here. Give us a flyover of the map. You know, show us that this map exists. You know, show us that you're still working on it. And I think people will have a lot of their fears calmed in that case. But I also think it's important for people to remember, hey, you know, this is in development. It's going to take time. And I think
Yeah.
if we're patient, you know, we'll see our fruits fulfilled, or you know, basically the fruits of their labor fulfilled for us. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, and then I think unless you had anything else to talk about for that, we could probably move into the Q&A.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Um, Here, let me look at the questions here. We got a
Yep.
couple from Heath.
Ah, yeah.
So, you want to take the first one? How do you want to do this?
Sure, I can take the first one here. All right,
All right.
so Heath R2 asks, do you think Castle Siege should be held off until it works well? Or should Intrepid release a less than par build of it, like they did for the Battle Royale?
Hmm.
So, for me personally, I think that what they need to do is they need to spend more time on it with the actual Alpha 1 backers. You know, the people that, you know, pay the money to go and test this first, you know? They need to make
Mm.
sure that the people that are getting into it know that, hey, this isn't going to be finished, this isn't going to be polished, and we need your help to make sure it gets there. Because if they just release it to the public in general, just to get more people testing it, I think that's going to keep giving people the wrong image of what Intrepid is trying to accomplish. Um, so I think they need to test it a little bit more internally before that happens.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at Castle Siege as like their saving grace from the BR.
Mhm.
So, a lot of people are waiting for this Castle Siege. They're pretty excited about it, and for it, even though even if they were, brought into it like, hey, this is alpha testing. Um, I think I still don't think people are gonna get that. I think they should definitely work on it. Like you said, internally test it a couple, however long, take the extra little bit of time that they
Mhm.
need and release a better version of it, better than what the battle royale is. But that being said, they have a lot of the internal backend systems working out, so it might not take them as long as we might think to get that kind of
Yeah,
better version of Castle Siege out.
that's true. I think the biggest thing that'll be tough for them is the mechanics. You know, working on those mechanics and getting those mechanics polished to a point where they actually function in game. You know,
Mm-hmm.
where you, like, let's say if you're trying to tear down a wall with a siege weapon, well, let's say, you know, part of the wall tears down, but you can't get over the rest, or you get stuck in the rubble, you know,
Yeah.
like stuff like that. You gotta work on that. Animation style wise, I'm not too worried about the animations, as long as the mechanic itself works well. Um, yeah. So if you want to go ahead and take the next question.
After the last couple Ashes podcasts, which did not shed a ton of light on new features for the MMORPG, these are you're talking. Heath is talking about the official. Wait, no, hold on. Okay, after the last couple Ashes podcasts, which did not shed a ton of light on new features for the MMORPG, do you believe development has entered a pseudo lull the last couple of months, or do you believe that they are getting a lot of done behind the scenes, at least the more than most naysayers realize? Oh, okay. He said that we already kind of answered this, and that is true. I'll move on to the next question.
Sure.
For Danley mainly, if you are trying to get better at the battle royale the fastest way possible, is it better to A, drop into the hottest area possible, or B, drop into a medium populated area? All right, Heath. And for those who are watching, let me tell you right here, right now, the best way to get better at the battle royale is, wait for it, get good. No, so what you should do is definitely the way I did it and the way I've done it in past battle royales. I'm a Fortnite cock kid. Anyways, the best way is definitely to drop in the hottest area. Whether that be Tilted Towers or the castle in Ashes, or just go into these highly populated areas, get those mechanics down, so you have more combat. That at the end of the day, it's getting more combat, practicing the combat, getting familiar with the combat, and then ultimately dominating your opponents.
That's true. I mean, for myself, like I put in probably about 1,400 hours into PUBG, another battle royale, right? And I would for like the first month, I literally did nothing but drop school. Like my first
Yep.
month's KDR was awful. It
Yep.
was really bad. But I just dropped school because I'm like, you know what, I want to
Yeah,
be
you get
good.
better.
Yeah. Obviously, it's frustrating when you have nothing but like a double barrel shotgun and they have
Yeah.
everything else, but that's just the nature of a
Name
battle
of the
royale.
game.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So for the next question here. So Can You Diglet says, I personally would like more information and your guys' take on the node system. I think it will be the driving force in the game. I want to know how we are going to play that system as a guild, both from the top and the bottom. So it's a good question. As far as what we know so far about the node system, we don't truthfully know a ton other than what's in nodes 1 and nodes 2. We're still waiting on nodes 3, which trademark coming soon. But from what we do know, we know that there's essentially, I think, 5 types, right? The divine, military, economic, scientific. Let's see here.
Military?
Yeah, I said
Did you say
military,
military?
scientific, divine, economic. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
So as far as those different types of nodes, I know that the scientific has essentially quick travel. They didn't say it seems like it would be teleporting. I think it would be more like how riding on like a mount from point A to point B automatically would work.
Yeah.
The militaristic node, from what we know, is going to basically be decided based on combat. Essentially, the last person standing will be the one that gets to control that node. Scientific will be based off of an election system, like a democratic system. The economic node, from what we know, is going to be able to have essentially a global auction house, but within its area of influence at the metro level.
And that's very interesting. Just
Yeah.
even the election part of it, how you have your mayor, how that's done, dependent on which node it is very interesting because you have your diplomatic node where, it's a democracy and you guys are, voting on who you think is the best, uh, for mayor. And then you have the opposite, which is like the military node where the mayor is chosen by arena battle, who's the best at PvP, which is like then their leadership of those two nodes are going to be vastly different. You got your like rule with the iron fist dude that and he might just go and try to pummel everyone in his way, or then you have the person who's more diplomatic and might go about his conflicts a little bit differently.
Yeah, exactly. Like with the economic, for instance, they've said that in order to basically become the leader, you have to have the most money. So it's gonna be very interesting to see how that works out.
Yes, very interesting.
Now, along with that, of course, there's a lot of pros and cons to the different types of nodes. For instance, if you are a military type PvP type guild, you're going to want to pick a military type node. But you also may want to pick a scientific node so that way you can get across the map that much quicker to attack your enemies and basically have faster movement in that sense, right? A lot of that's just theory crafting because we don't really have a ton of information on it. I do know that when it comes to the divine node, there's been, I think, somewhat confirmed rumors from Steven that it's going to have some of the best and largest raids in it. That he's going to, if he can, put in like an underworld when you get to metro level, where you can go into like the depths of Hades and essentially fight the greatest raids possible. That's
Really?
Steven kind of confirmed because he said it's like a goal of his, but obviously that may not happen depending on what their budget is or what time permits. But for us as a guild, my personal goal is to make sure that we choose one that best aligns with us as a culture. For instance, since we are an economic focused guild, I'd prefer to go to an economic based node, just so we can meet that need, right? Also, since we are looking at an economic position, we can use that that money that wealth to help gear us better, to help us get the best mercenaries that we
Hmm.
need for defending the city or attacking other nodes. There's gonna be quite a lot of strategy that goes into it. I just need more information to be able to make that final choice. All right, and then if
Um,
you want to read off the next question.
yeah. So Heath asked, after playing games like Sea of Thieves, Atlas, and Arcade, do you still think such difficult systems like naval combat, naval caravans, islands, etc., are possible within this year time frame, on top of everything else?
Hmm.
Um, I'll give this one to you, Sinbad, as you're the
Sure.
pirate.
Yes, this is true. So I do think it's possible. They said that they're not focusing on physics for the ocean style play. So it's going to be dumbed down compared to, Sea of Thieves or Atlas, right?
Hmm.
Like you're
Hmm.
not going to necessarily be needing, six people to turn the sails and then having to counter the wind to build a move necessarily, I don't think. But you will have people that will need to man the cannons or, basically help defend your ship or, basically be like a raiding or boarding party. Um, Obviously, there's still not a lot of info on that, but I do know that there will be different professions involved in the shipping line, essentially, right? Whether you're going to have someone that is a gunner or someone who's a navigator or someone who's able to help repair the ship more efficiently, that kind of thing. Um, so I know it's an in-depth system, but I don't think it's as in-depth because they're not having to worry on the actual physics involved with it. They're not going to be worrying about basically creating an engine that can handle the wave motions and how that affects your ship. Um, so I think in that sense, it's going to be a little bit dumbed down, but I think it's going to help them with cutting down time on it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can expect that. Like,
Hmm.
it isn't like they might have that feature in the game, but it's not like a naval based game,
Right.
so can't expect like these, super in-depth physics or mechanics to the naval part of it, because ultimately that isn't the main part of the game.
Hmm. Exactly. All right. And then the last question we have here is, what does one have to do to be in these podcasts as well? I recently started streaming. I'd like to engage more with our guild and the Ashes community in general. So if you want to be on a future podcast with us, message myself or Danny. We'll be, looking out for different topics that we can bring up. And if you fit one of those topics really well, we'll probably bring you on board for it.
Yeah.
Obviously, we do have somewhat limited spots. I like to keep, any of our podcasts to a maximum of 4 people at a time, just to avoid,
Mhm.
Too many people kind of talking over each other or
Yeah,
no
it
one
gets a little
getting.
crazy
Yeah,
pretty fast.
exactly.
Try to get
So
some time in.
it will be on a somewhat first come, first serve basis, but we will be trying to pick the best people for those specific topics. So, for example, if we're talking about, let's say PvP, we're going to want people that are very much PvP oriented. So that way they can
Yeah.
answer those questions intelligently.
Yeah.
But yep, and
Yeah.
I think that's it, right, Danny?
Yeah, I think that's it. That's all we have for tonight. We wanted to make sure, we focus more on the, you know, successes of Intrepid, rather than the recent negativity that has, kind of surrounded the
The game, yeah,
whole stigma of Intrepid. So we wanted to
exactly.
make sure that was what we had for topic for today.
Yep. So, Danny, why don't you tell them where they can find you and what you're up to?
Well, you guys can find me on my Twitch, twitch.tv/dphantomtv. I'm your guy for any PvP, oriented questions, or if you guys want to know how
Hmm.
to get good at the BR, or probably the Castle Siege too, because your boy is your boy. Yeah, catch me at my Twitch. Yeah.
Sounds good, man. All right, and for me, I am Sinbad. I'm the leader of Ember. We are an Ashes of Creation guild focused on PvX. So we're going to be doing a bit of everything. We're going to be doing everything from PvP on the hardcore side to PvE as well. We have an economic focus though as a guild, so we're going to be wanting to dominate the economy in this game and really, that control of the market. I think that's going to give us a lot of success in all aspects. When it comes down to it, we do have restricted recruiting right now. We are actually slowing down recruitment as we get to nearing the size of the guild that we want. We are focused on creating a very tight knit community and one that is focused on building those relationships and building those friendships. One that's also focused on creating content. and really getting our name out there. So if you're interested in checking us out, I'll go ahead and post the description with a link in there for the guild. It'll be on our YouTube video. You can find us, of course, you can find me, of course, at twitch.tv/Sinbad_IRL, or at our YouTube page, which we'll also have a link down below, which would be Ember TV, would be the end link there. But check us out, guys. Come by and see if you want to hang out and get to know us and possibly join. But for now, then,
Cool.
I think I'm going to hand it off to Danny. You want to say goodbye for us?
That's it. Goodbye, guys. Thanks for watching the stream and the video and all the crazy topics that we'll have in the future. Make sure you're watching that, and see you guys later.
All right, see you guys.
This fire. I was born to be making history. Something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire.